What's up, beautiful jellyfish? It's Tracy. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video. Today I'm going to be doing a video on a deck tech on my modern elf deck, and I've been playing this deck for, I don't even know how long I've had this deck for. Maybe like 2 months. I'm not really sure how long I've had it for, but I don't know if this is the deck that I'm going to be sticking with for modern, but it's the deck that I'm going to be sticking with for a little bit until I build something else. I'm looking right now at Little Kid Abzan, no idea what I'm going to do. I may proxy up Affinity too. I have a thing for Affinity in modern. I love it. Like it's just so like fun, and I was goldfishing the other day and I was like, this deck is really cool. I kind of want to build it. So I don't know. We'll see. But for right now I'm sticking with Elves, and let's just talk about the deck and basically what this deck tries to do. Now, the deck mainly is green. You'll see some variations that run white in it. My version runs black for Shaman of the Pact, which is the best card in this entire deck. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But basically, the whole premise of Elves is that you try to basically just make like a bunch of dudes. Like, you overwhelm your opponent and you can do it very, very quickly. The deck is prone to field wipes. It's bad against field wipes. Has an awful Tron matchup. If they play Pyroclasm, you cry a lot. Tron is one of those matchups where you sit down and you are kind of like, yeah, I'm gonna lose this game of Magic, and you probably will because the matchup is awful. They play Karn, not really so much, but they play Ugin, and then they just play Pyroclasm and you just can't do anything about it. So Azuri is super helpful for that purpose because you can regenerate your elves if you have mana open. So my build is a little bit different than other builds. One, because I'm not running white. Two, I'm not running as many Azuris because I'm running Shaman of the Pact. So my version of the deck is a little bit different. However, I am happy with the deck. It's also running this new card from Origins called Dwynen's Elite. This card is fantastic. Again, I'll talk about it when I get into the breakdown of the deck, but basically, this is a sweet deck. I do not think that this deck gets enough attention in Modern. I think that a lot of people can't really formulate their opinion on this deck because they're like, oh, I haven't seen Elves, they're probably not that good because they're prone to field, they're bad against field wipes. That's something, honestly, when you look at, like, a lot of decks in the format, they have a lot of spot removal. A lot of decks have mainboard spot removal. And then your opponent's like, I'm gonna path to exile your Archdroid or your Azuri, and you're like, okay, I've got like 10 other elves to deal with, have fun. So given it's not good against those field wipes, but it kind of reminds me a little bit of Affinity, where if you've seen Affinity decks, they just kind of like dump their hand. So you do that a lot with elves, so it can be good against blue decks. Also, you run Cavern of Souls, you run 4 in this deck, and again, I'll talk about that card in a little bit, but you know, they can't counter everything. They've got like one counter spell, and you've got like, I'm gonna just jump all these cards from my hand, basically. So the deck is just, it's super sweet. I like it a lot. I don't know how long I'm gonna stick with it, but I'm enjoying it for now. It's a lot of fun. I went 2-2 the other night in Modern. I played against blue white Tron. Actually had a good time against that. I was doing things. It was great. Again, those mainboard Pyroclasms are terrible, but then the next round I sat down against red green Tron and I said I'm gonna lose, and I did. Then I played against my friend Justin, who's playing Delver. I have a great Delver matchup. So I beat Grixis Delver, so I beat that. And then I played against Living End. And both of the games, if he didn't kill me that turn, I was going to kill him next turn, so he kind of just won. So it's whatever. So okay, we're gonna talk about my breakdown of the deck. It's gonna be in the description box below if you want to check it out, if you want to follow along. This deck runs 34 creatures. It's a lot, but you definitely need it. It's definitely super essential. So, starting with Dwynen's Elite, my deck runs 2 of these. This card is amazing. This card is very underrated. I haven't really looked at a lot of other people's deck lists for this deck, to be honest. So I don't know how many decks are running this card, but they should be. If you're building elves, I'd highly recommend this card. The reason why this card is so good, because you play turn 1 Heritage Droid, turn 2, you pay 2 mana, you play Dwynen's Elite. Since you control another elf, you get 2, then you can tap those three dudes, and then you can play your Elvish Archdroid or your Azuri or like whatever. So it's just super, super good. It's basically like you pay 3 mana, you pay 2 mana to get 3 power and toughness. It's absolutely amazing. I don't know if I would necessarily 3 or 4 run this card. I think that there's other things that you can be doing with your mana. Also, something that's really cool about this deck is this deck is really bad against the magic card. I always get them confused. Is it Spell Pierce? I think it's Spell Pierce, the one where it counters target spell with converted mana cost 2. There's like, how many things in this deck are cost 2? There's Elvish, Visionary, and Dwynen's Elite. Literally, that's it. That's in the deck. That's 2 mana. So yeah, that card is super, super sweet. I like it. Like I said, I don't know if a lot of other people may claim that there are better things. I personally love it in the deck, and it's a great addition. The deck runs 4 Elvish Archdroids. This is essential. This card is amazing because basically, like I said before, so say the scenario happens where you turn 1 Heritage Droid, turn 2 Dwynen's Elite, tap those 3 dudes, and play Elvish Archdroid. Turn 3, you draw a card, say you play a land, you can play more dudes, you can then tap Elvish Archdroid for more mana, and your elves get +1/+1. This is absolutely 100% not negotiable. If you're building elves, you need to be running 4 of this card. It's amazing. And then we talk about a really interesting card in this deck, and I've heard a lot of people who are like, I don't know how you feel about this in the main. I like it, and that is Elvish Champion. Because even if you play Elvish Champion and you're not playing against someone who has forests, still, your dudes get +1/+1, which is super helpful. And I found that a lot of decks in Modern are going to be running, Overgrown Tombs and basic forests. So a lot of times you can just, step right over their dudes, and you're just like, you don't even care. There's also one in the sideboard, and it's super good. Like I said, I've had some people who've been like, but I really like it, and I think it's a really good card. Then we have Elvish Mystic. This card's pretty self-explanatory. It's a mana dork. If you get this or Heritage Droid at turn 1, it's a good day. It's a really good day. Elvish Visionary. This card's fantastic because it does like 2 things that you want it to. It's a creature, and it draws you cards. And it may not look like a lot because you're like, oh, you just draw 1 card, but it's super important in this deck because you could just top like a Coco or something like that, and you're just like super happy about that. So Elvish Visionary is really good. This card's really interesting, and I've actually toyed with taking it out, and this is a card that if I'm playing and I'm playing against a fast deck, I take it out pretty much immediately because it doesn't do anything immediately, and that is Eternal Witness. I love Ewit, I do. However, I was even considering cutting her from this deck completely, and you may be like, oh my gosh, but the thing is that she's not good against slow decks, because on turn, like, you can cast her on turn 2, turn 3, whatever, but the thing is then it's like, oh, you play Ewit, and you get back, like, a Coco or something like that, which is super great, but, like, it's just not that, like, it's good, don't get me wrong, I just don't know if I love it in this deck. And I just feel like a lot of times it's just too slow. It's seriously one of the first cards I take out in my sideboard, so, for my sideboard, so. That is that. Then we get into the part where people wholeheartedly disagree with me on this. Wholeheartedly. And that is, I run 1, not 3, but 1 Azuri. And I'll talk about it, when I get to Shaman of the Pact, because like I said, that's just key card in this deck, but I do want to put another Azuri in this deck. I just don't have room. I don't know what I'm going to take out. Like I said, I may take out the Eternal Witness. I may take out the, what was it? There's another thing I was considering? I don't remember. I don't know. Azuri is really, really amazing. What's super sweet about Azuri is sometimes you can cast Azuri and you can do his ability, like, twice. I've done that before. It's super great. You're like, I'm going to give my dudes +6/+6 and trample. Yeah, have fun dealing with that. And the fact that you can regenerate another target elf is super important. The reason why I actually am only running 1 is 1, because I don't have room, and 2, this deck is pretty tight. There's not a lot of room for switching out cards and things like that. With Azuri, it's legendary, so a lot of times when you play it, you don't want to Coco into it if you already have one on the board, because that's awkward. So you're kind of like, So I like Azuri, don't get me wrong, and I probably am going to throw another one in there, but like I said, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be playing this deck for, so, but I will say, like, if I am to play this deck for a lot longer, I think I would swap the Ewit and the Azuri. He's super, super good. And then we talk about, this card is just so amazing, and that is Heritage Droid. This card is super great. The reason why this card is amazing is because this card is amazing with Nettle Sentinel, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but this card is fantastic because it gives you stuff to do with your mana that, like, you just play your elves, right? Like, you just play them, and you're like, oh man, like, they just gotta sit there because they have summoning sickness. Hey, no, you can tap them with Heritage Druid for mana to do other things. This card is amazing with Nettle Sentinel. Like, the synergy of those two cards is absolutely fantastic because you play a green spell, they untap, you tap them again with Heritage Druid. It is absolutely insane. Next card in the deck is Llanowar Elves. Literally the same thing as Elves Mystic. Just a mana dork, great, absolutely fantastic to get it out turn 1. Nettle Sentinel. This card does not look like a lot. It actually looks bad. You're like 1 mana for a 2/2 that doesn't tap during next untap step. Oh my gosh, you play so much stuff in this deck. Everything in your deck is green. Every single thing in this deck that you play is green, other than your lands. So like, you get this card to untap basically always. And again, this card with Heritage Druid synergizes so amazingly. It is insane. Let me talk about best card in this entire deck. I'm going to do a card focus on this card because I don't even think I can express to you in this video how amazing Shaman of the Pact is. This card, I keep saying Pact, it's Pact. I don't know why I keep saying Pact. Shaman of the Pact, let's talk about it. Okay, a lot of people are like, you run Elves, you're going to kill me with a bunch of 1/1s and 2/2s, ha ha ha. Oh, really? How about I don't do that? And then I have 10 Elves on the board, and then I Shaman of the Pact. Coco into Shaman of the Pact. You know what's even better? Coco into 2 Shaman of the Pacts. Lived the dream the other night. It was amazing. It was a casual game of Magic, but I don't care because I lived the dream. I cast Court of Calling into 2. It was the greatest thing I did all night. It's like, boom, 12 damage in 1 turn. And that's the thing with this deck, is that if you're playing against a deck and they have just so much power on the board where you can't even get through their wall, you don't even care because you play this card. And the fact that this card, after it does its thing, is a 3 mana 3/2, that is fantastic. It is so, so amazing. Absolutely 100% worth splashing black in this deck for. And it's just best card in this entire deck. I can't even tell you how often I kill people with this card. It is just, this is how I want to win. It's just literally how I want to win. It's so good. Right. And then the deck main boards 1 Spellskite. Now, here's the deal. I like Spellskite. I do. It's super sweet. Someone's all like, I'm gonna go, like, do the thing where I, like, lightning bolt your dude, and you're like, Spellskite. Spellskite's great. It's a super amazing magic card. However, I don't love it in this deck in the main board. And the reason why is because a lot of times I'll like, Coco, and I'm like, Spellskite? I'm like, I don't want to draw a spell. I don't want to Coco into Spellskite. Like, and then when it's like one of your only creatures, you're like, I don't want to do that. So where I understand it's good, it's kind of one of those, like, I think someone phrased it as like a necessary evil in the deck. You don't love it, but it kind of has to be there. I do agree. I think it needs to be there. I think the amount of spot removal that you're going to run into is definitely, like, a thing that's going to happen. However, I'm not 100% completely in love with it. There's actually not even another one in the sideboard. Some people may disagree with me with it, but to be honest, I feel like if anything, you're going to run into people who are just board wiping, because a lot of times spot removal is just not good in this deck. Like, against this deck, because again, you just have so much power on the board that a lot of times, like, they're like, you just have all these, like, 1/1s, and they're like, I mean, I guess I'll path your Heritage Druid. Like, they don't want to do that. I feel like this is so funny. Is literally, this was the same thing when I had tokens, because people were like, I don't want to path your 1/1 token, and I'm like, but you have to, or you'll die. So, I'm pretty sure my camera's gonna die soon, so we're gonna attempt to speed this up. We're gonna talk about lands now. For Cavern of Souls, you 100% need this in your deck. This card is just fantastic. It is an anti-blue card, on top of it being an anti-blue card. The fact that with in the deck, you have Shaman of the Pact, and you can get that green color, you can get that black from it, because everything else in the deck is going to produce, like, green mana and stuff, like Elvish Archer and things like that, and Nykthos. So, like, you're just like, okay, cool, I'm just gonna, like, cast my Cavern of Souls, and I can play Shaman of the Pact with it. So, super amazing, absolutely essential. The deck runs 6 forests, and that is pretty standard. I've seen 5 because I've seen the additional Nykthos, which I'm actually going to talk about right now. I'm only running 2 Nykthos. I've tried it with 3. It has not worked. I wanted it to work so badly. The problem is in this deck, you need, like, turn 1, you can't, the thing is with this deck, is you can keep a land with one hand, you can keep a hand with one land in it, because you play turn 1 Heritage Druid, or turn 1 Elvish Mystic, or whatever, and you're pretty much set as long as they don't kill it. So, like, the thing is that if you keep a hand with one land, that's a Nykthos in it, which has happened to me several times, it's awkward, it doesn't work. I took it out, to be honest. Is it necessarily the right decision? For me playtesting the deck, I feel like it is. A lot of people would disagree. This is how I felt in playtesting. So that was why I went with it. Then the deck runs one Okina, I believe it is, Temple to the Grandfathers. And this card is really good for Elvish Champion and Azuri. I'm not in love with it in my build because I only run one Azuri, but like I said, if I bump it up to 2, I'm going to be more okay with it. Yeah, this card's pretty sweet. It just kind of gets you in points of damage. If not, it's just green mana, basically. The deck runs 4 Overgrown Tombs, and if you are running Shaman in your list, which you should because it's super sweet, yeah, this is kind of essential. You don't really care that much about Shocking, because you don't do damage. You don't fetch in this deck. You know, this is pretty much the only thing that you're doing in this deck that's gonna, you know, do damage to you, along with your Spellskite, which, I mean, I don't really think is a huge deal, so that's that. And then the deck runs Pendelhaven. A lot of times this card is actually pretty useless, because a lot of times you just have Elvish Archdruid, so it kind of just sits there, but again, it provides green mana for you, and if you are, like, your opponent's at, like, 2 life, and you're, like, Elvish Mystic, get +1/+2, like, that must be living the dream. I feel like that would be sweet. Then we talk about Instants. 4 Court of Calling. This card's fantastic. It's just like, I'm gonna tap my dudes and get whatever I need. Most of the time, it's Shaman. Sometimes it's Azuri. Sometimes it's Archdruid. Sometimes it's Elvish Champion. If you're playing against a green deck, you're like, huh, Court into Elvish Champion? Seems good. Then we get into second best card in this entire deck, and this was one of the reasons why I wanted to build Elves, because I just really wanted to cast Collected Company. Let me talk to you about this magic card. This magic card is fantastic. It's just, you pay 4 mana at instant speed to get dudes on your board that a lot of times you'll get like 2-3 drops. You paid 4 mana at instant speed for something that is valued at 6 mana. Oh my goodness. And then Shaman, Coco into Shaman, best thing you will do in this deck. It is amazing. I love, love, love Collected Company. Absolutely fantastic. Needed in this deck. Beautiful. Then we talk about Sideboard. So the deck runs 3 Beast Within. I don't mind this card as much. I kind of wasn't a huge fan of it before. But it's pretty okay. And the reason why this card is super sweet is because it deals with everything. You're kind of just like, I don't like your thing. In the future, like I said, if I were to like redo this deck, and like if I was to play this for a lot longer, these would probably be Abrupt Decays, to be honest, because Abrupt Decay is just super, super good. But for right now, they're Beast Withins. I think if you are going to do black-green, I think Abrupt Decay is a really good option. Also, they don't get the Beast token with it, but I think this card is just good against, like, Tron, because the Tron matchup is terrible, and you just can't deal with, like, anything that Tron does, pretty much. If you can kill them, like, if you can avoid Pyroclasm and, like, play, like, if you win on, like, turn 4, when they've, like, just got, like, whatever, like, if you can do that, you're fine, but, like, if they play, like, Ugin turn 4, you're probably dead. So, yeah. Alright, then we get into this card, which is super, super good. And then we get into Choke. Want to hear a really cool story about how I played against my friend Justin the other night? Said, hey, Choke isn't that good against Delver. This card is fantastic against Delver, fantastic against Merfolk. Given Merfolk has Aether Vial, so they're just kind of like, you know, make my dude whatever. But, like, Choke is just, like, funny, and it's super funny against Delver, because Delver runs 16 lands. I'm sorry. 17. 17? I think Delver runs 17 lands. So, Delver's like, oh, this is great, I'm gonna keep a hand with, like, 1 land in Delver, and my other stuff, this is gonna be great. And then they're like, turn 1 Delver, and then you're like, okay. Turn 2 Choke, and then they're like, okay. And they have a 3/2 flyer, and they can't untap their land, and they are sad. It is amazing. It's so good. I want to play this card against Merfolk, because I think it would just be super great. So, I think that Choke is really, really awesome. Okay. Elves Champion in the side. I think this card is just super, super essential. A lot of people would say just to run it in the sideboard, but I do like one in the main board. Yeah, again, super good. You're gonna be playing against a lot of decks in the format that are running green, so I really like this deck a lot. The deck runs 2 Murderous Cuts in the side. I'm actually not in love with this. Like I said, I think if I could switch off the Abrupt Decays, maybe do 1 Murderous Cut in the sideboard, because, given I do... The thing is that I do often have, like, stuff in... not stuff in my graveyard. Getting to 5 mana is not an issue in this deck, like, at all. But the problem is mostly the black symbol, because I only run 4 Overgrown Tombs, and I can't, like... So it can get a little bit awkward, so I'm not absolutely 100% in love with Murderous Cut, but I love the card. Like, I love Murderous Cut. I just don't know how I love it in this deck. I think if I were to redo it, I would just do 1. Then we get into 3 Reclamation Sage. This card is fantastic. It does 2 things that you want it to. For 3 mana, you can Court of Calling for it, which is super good. So for 3 mana, you get a 2/1. That also gets rid of an artifact or an enchantment. Super, super fantastic. A lot of people were like, oh, why are you 3-running this card? I was like, because artifacts and enchantments are things that you just need to get rid of. It's just so good. And like I said, having the opportunity to, like, chord for it, given in the future, maybe this could be knocked down to, like, 2. You can get away with maybe, like, 2. I've seen a couple of people actually mainboard in a Reclamation Sage. I don't know how I feel about that, to be honest, because what if, like, you top deck it and it's just so useless? Like, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of it, but that's just me. The deck needs something to deal with graveyard, because people have scary things and you just don't want to deal with them. So I run Relic of Progenitus. I run 2. And I do like this card. I would like to run, like, Rest in Peace instead, but I'm not running white, and I feel like that's a huge advantage that the deck has of running white, is you can run Rest in Peace, which is so good, and just shuts down so many different decks. But Relic of Progenitus is still really good. I do like how you get to draw a card off of it too, which is super awesome. So yeah, and then speaking of Graveyard Hate, we also have Scavenging Ooze. Card is absolutely fantastic. You gain life, which is, like, the burn deck's, like, least favorite thing that you could ever do in the game. You exile cards from graveyards, and your Scooze gets bigger. For 2 mana. Super, super amazing. This card's fantastic. I actually am deciding to uptick this and... Uptick? What? What are we, like, am I playing Planeswalkers right now? Super Friends? What's going on? I don't know how to say this, but Tajura Preserver? This card is fantastic because I actually played against, when I played against Living End, that was my first time ever seeing Living End, like, in action. I had never seen, I knew what Living End did, but I had never played against it before, whatever. This card's also really fantastic against Liliana the Veil because you're like, you can't make me sack my stuff. So this card is super great, and again, for 2 mana, it's a 2/1, you can Court of Calling for it, it's really good. So that was my deck tech on the deck. I'm gonna list, I've talked about it a couple times, but Mike Malone's list, who got first place at GP Charlotte, so, which was back in the summer. And yeah, the deck is sweet. It's very, very similar to mine. A couple of things that I'm not running in the deck, I talked about a couple of my numbers and how they're different, is a lot of elf decks run this card called Fanwa Shaman. I 100% do not like this card in this deck. I played with it. I don't like it. You dump your hand so frequently in this game that you're just kind of like, oh, well, I have nothing to discard for this card. You go into it. It's not what you want to see most of the time. Like, you top deck it and you're like, why can't this be like an Elvish Visionary? Like, it's a good magic card. I just don't like it in this deck. And I just don't like it. And I feel like that spot is just, like, could be filled with something that's just not that magic card. So I'm not a huge fan of that. I think that was it for all that I wanted to talk about with the differences. I mean, there's a couple of other differences. His deck runs Thragtusk. A lot of people are like, oh, you need like late game and stuff like that. And I personally found with this deck that, like, you do the early game. That is what your objective is to kill someone on turn 3 or turn 4. That's what you want to be doing in this deck. So, like, you want to do that, and, like, I don't know, that's, like, your game plan, and, like, if it's turn, like, 5, maybe not turn 5, but if it's, like, later on in the turns, you're probably just dead. Like, this is a deck that is meant to be quick, so I don't know if I necessarily, like, think that this deck needs to focus more on the late game or anything like that. That's the reason I originally put Tasigur in the deck. It didn't work. I replaced Tasigur for another Shaman because it was just the best card in the deck, so... yeah, the deck is, like I said, it's a lot of fun. In terms of power level, the deck is powerful. It like I said, a lot of people just can't have answers to it in the early game. Like, you'll be playing against a blue deck, and you play Cavern of Souls. Or you're playing against a blue deck, and they're just like, I can counter one thing, and, like, that's it. Because they waste 2 mana remanding something, and you just play it next turn. Like, there's just so many things with the deck. And a lot of times, it's just so quick that a lot of other decks just can't really answer to it. It doesn't have answers. That's a huge thing with this deck. You do your own thing. You play this deck, and you play your game. You don't play someone else's. You're so focused on what the things that you're doing. So if that makes you feel insecure, I know it makes me feel insecure. I'm not 100% in love with how I don't have any main board answers. I'm like, I feel like I should be running Path to Exile. I think it's because, like, I played Black-White Tokens for so long that I was like, I should be running Path to Exile, and I'm not doing that, so it's kind of like a weird sort of thing, but I don't think that's an issue, because again, I think that you want to be spending your mana on cards that will benefit you, which is why cards like Reclamation Sage are so good, because they kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Like, you get an elf that also, like, hurts your opponent's board, and that's, like, the really big thing I think to focus on in the sideboard the most, is getting elves for your sideboard that you can replace in your main. So, yeah. And also, the deck does have good matchups. It has a great Delver matchup. It has a great Merfolk matchup. You have a great Merfolk matchup because you, like, it's just quicker. A lot of times this deck is just quicker than that. Tron is terrible. Again, if you can kill... The thing is that it's probably, like... Let's say, like, 30-70. Because if you can... Maybe like 35, 40, 7... Whatever the math is. Let's just say, like, you kill them early on, they can't do anything, so maybe it's not, like, super bad. If you're playing against Mindslavertron, maybe it's not that awful, I don't know. Again, I don't think you care really about blue. I don't think you really care about blue in this deck. But, yeah, apparently the living in matchup is pretty awful. I was not aware of that. I was playing against this kid, and he was like, your deck's really sweet, and I was like, thanks, because he was all, like, playing a land and, like, passing, and I was all like, I'm doing Hellish Droid and, like, Nittle Sentinel, and he's like, I'm gonna play a land. I was like, alright then. And it's okay because he killed me on both games turn 4. Okay, so that was that. But, yeah. That's pretty much it for me. Yeah, I think that's all I was gonna say. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day/night, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.